Hello and welcome to the StreelTrack shop. My name is Sean, I'm the owner of StreelTrack, and what we're going to go through on this video is some steps that are involved in installing our 3-link rear suspension system to your car. We've actually had a ton of inquiries on how does this install and where did this bit go and where does that bit go. Really, because it's so radically different than a leaf-sprung car, it's sometimes difficult to send somebody a picture and them actually see that. So over this winter we've actually built this display, which is basically a 6570 Mustang transition pan and a couple of frame rails, powder coated in a nice contrasting color, and now we can hang our nice black shiny gloss black parts to it, and you can visually really see where the parts go. And then if you're lucky enough to see us at some of the shows that we do, you can see this in person. But what we'll do now is we'll go ahead and install two of the frameworks which will go onto the chassis, which will be the 3rd-link front bearing support frame and then the Wattslink frame. Okay, so here we have our framework that comes in the kit. This is the 3rd-link front bearing support. And what this will do is this will carry actually the bearing comes pre-installed. It will carry the bearing for the front of the 3rd-link that comes off the top of the pumpkin. One of the first steps you'll need to do on your car is actually remove the stock snubber bracket that's spot welded to the transition pan here. So you'll take your spot weld cutter and you'll remove that piece. It's no longer required to have a snubber there now because the 3-link will control the pinion angle when you're driving along, so the pinion will never need a snubber anymore. So what you can see here is this is actually our billet CNC piece that's run on the mill, then welded in with some tubing, and then these sections here, this U-channel, will actually hug the frame rails. And then on the front here is what I call the Ducksbill piece, which actually will bolt down inside the transmission tunnel here on the overlapping sections of sheet metal from the transition pan into the floor. So then you have a nice double layer of sheet metal there to bolt this thing into. So this would rest on the car like so, and then we'll go through the drilling of holes and the actual bolting in procedure next. Okay, so now that we've got the 3rd-link bearing support frame installed on the frame rails, it's pretty easy to locate the frame on the frame rails because it just falls into a natural location where these sections here will hug the frame rails. The straight bar here will be up against, fairly close up against the shock bracket here, the stock shock bracket, but then more importantly the Ducksbill area on the bearing support section here will be up and against the transition pan and the sheet metal layers, and that really is how it locates itself. There really isn't any scientific way of measuring this or anything. You put it in the car and until the Ducksbill matches the sheet metal, the stock sheet metal. So the framework is just resting here now on the display, and the display has actually been fully mocked up before it was painted anyway, and the holes have actually been drilled. But you will have to drill 2 holes here and then 2 holes on the other side on the outboard sections here to mount this. So we're just going to go through that process right now. Once the framework is installed, what you're going to do is you're going to drill 2 half-inch holes on this side of the bracket, but you are not going to go all the way through, and that'll be explained in a second here. So what you would do is you would drill these holes, and then in the kit itself is this like a drill guide bushing that has a half-inch outside diameter with a 3/8 hole through here. So once you've drilled your half-inch holes on the outboard side, you would put this drill guide into the hole, and you want the holes to be nice and tight, so you might need to actually tap this into place. Okay, now with this bushing resting here, what we would do is drill a 3/8 inch hole through the inboard side of the frame rail. And the idea behind this, and the reason we do this, is because we are going to use a shoulder bolt. these are used so that when if we were to drill a 1/2 inch hole through the whole thing and start cranking down on the bolt and the nut itself, it would just smash the frame rail. It would continually keep crushing the frame rail. You would never be able to get the correct torque, and it wouldn't hold that torque. The idea behind the shoulder bolts is this shank section here is actually 1/2 inch, and then this section is 3/8. So the aim here is to use the shims that we provide you here to actually have this section of the shoulder where it transitions from 1/2 inch actually on the inboard side of the sheet metal. So it'll actually create a physical stop where it will hit that 3/8 hole step down, and then you can actually use the nut here and actually get the required torque. This thing will stay tight. It's not going to smash your frame rails down, and it's going to be a much better way of doing this. So once that 3/8 hole is drilled, you would insert these into all 4 places on the framework here, and then move on to the next step. Alright, now that we have the outboard sections of the U-channel from the third link bearing support frame installed on the car's frame rails, we're going to turn our attention to the Ducksbill section here that's resting against the transition pan sheet metal here. Obviously the Ducksbill is already going to have the holes already pre-drilled in there where you need to drill, and what you're going to do is take your 3/8 drill bit here and drill 3 holes using these holes already in the Ducksbill section as a guide, and you're going to go through the transition pan and through the floor pan of the car. Obviously take out your rear seat and carpet before you do this. So we're going to go ahead and do these 3/8 holes. Then what you're going to do is there is a U-strap section of steel that we will send with the system here, and what this is, this will actually get just stitch welded or skip welded onto the interior of the car. All this will be hidden under the rear seat, so it's not visible when done, and you can actually see there's already one already welded on here. And what this effectively does is it gives us a really strong sandwich of material to mount this to. So you'll have this on the inside, you'll have 2 layers of the original sheet metal, then you'll have this Ducksbill section, and then when we run the bolts through the 4 layers of material and tighten these down, it creates a very, very strong joint, if you will, for the third link to attach to. So these will all get installed like so, and then torqued down, and once those are torqued once those are torqued down, that's it. That's the third link frame is installed, and then we can move on to the Wattslink frame. Okay, what we have here is our Wattslink frame. I'm going to go through the process of installing this onto the car right now. It installs on the frame rails in the exact same way that the third link frame did, in that we have the 1/2 inch holes on the outboard side of the U-channel here and the 3/8 holes on the inboard side. You'll use the exact same procedure of shims on the shoulder bolts, using the same drill guide. Everything is exactly the same. The Wattslink fits on the car on the stock position of the frame rails very easily, and then the back edge of the tubing would rest against the stock sheet metal here of the gas tank lip. These holes here is where the stock gas tank would mount to, so it's a really good locator. The U-channels would be rear of the stock bump stops, and then the tubing on the framework here is up against this lip here. Just a quick mention on those cars that are running a mini tub system that have actually moved the frame rails. Our system is completely compatible with that, but obviously if you've moved the frame rails, you'll need to move the U-channel on the Wattslink. Having said that, there are lots of our customers that have removed the U-channel to relocate them to their new frame rails and then fully welded the Wattslink into place. Unlike the third link frame that actually needs to come out of the car when it's time to service the bearing, the Wattslink never needs to come out. The frame is in there, it doesn't need to come out for any kind of service whatsoever. So it's absolutely fine if you wish to weld this framework into the car. As an experiment, I did actually run my track car with slicks for a year with the welded-in Wattslink, the bolted-in Wattslink, just to see how the shoulder bolt system held up and if there was any egging of the holes under all the lateral loads that were generated with 1.1, 1.2 Gs of cornering forces with slick tires. And I'm happy to report there was absolutely no egging of any holes, no distortion whatsoever. So the shoulder bolt system is very strong way of attaching this to the car, but obviously feel free to weld the system in, the Wattslink frame in, if you wish. So I'm going to go ahead now and bolt this into the car, into this display in the exact same way that I did with the third link frame, and then I'll give you a quick shot of how that looks when it's installed. Okay, so now that you can actually see we have the Wattslink frame installed, we bolted it into the frame rails using the same shoulder bolts that we used on the third link frame, and it's resting against the gas tank lip here. Now we can turn our attention to the third link itself. It's actually cut from a one-piece huge sheet of 1-inch thick steel. We laser cut these, and it's shaped to follow the trunk floor. So this end here is going to thread into the bearing here in the frame bracket here, and then this end has the bushing that's going to fit inside the tabs that get welded to the top rear section of your rear end. So quite simply has threads on both ends, both the bearing end and the bushing end. Are threaded, and then that is actually how you adjust your pinion angle. By lengthening this or shortening this, you effectively can change the pinion angle to your needs based on whatever transmission, engine, driveline angle that you actually have. So this would go in here. There's a couple of jam nuts to lock it in place. Once you get the length set, we'll just rest this here on the display right now, and then when we get the rear end in here, we'll actually connect this to the tabs that are on the housing. Alright, now while we have the display here, we have a great opportunity to see the benefit of a shoulder bolt. The backside of the frame rail, as you can see, is completely exposed because of our display here, so you can see right inside, and you can actually see the 1/2-inch hole on this face, the 3/8 hole on this face, and you can see the shank here of the shoulder bolt, and then when it steps down to the 3/8 threaded section, we actually want that shoulder to be pressing on the inboard side of the inner section of the frame rail. So we would adjust the amount of shims under the head of the shoulder bolt until you obviously don't want it to end here, you don't want it to end here, you're just going to be smashing down the frame rail. You want to adjust that stack until the shoulder is just touching here, and then at that point you can put the nut on, torque to the spec in the instruction booklet, and then it will hold the torque without smashing your frame rails. Okay, now that we have the Wattslink frame, the third link frame and the third link actually installed in the chassis, one of the last things to do chassis side before we move to the rear end housing is to actually install the trailing arms. These are our trailing arms. They have left and right hand threaded tubes so that you can adjust the length. They do come preset and you shouldn't have to mess with them. But if you do want to move the rear end forward and rearward in the chassis, you have that option. This is a very adjustable sort of system, but it does come with many things preset. So if you're a tinkerer, please feel free to play around with it. If you just want to bolt it in and go and trust us that we've preset it where you need it, then just leave it alone. But basically you have a couple of options where these will mount. You can go straight with the stock leaf spring pocket right here, or you can install them in what we call the lower longer mount, which would be a bracket that gets welded onto the rear torque box here. Basically, by lowering and lengthening the link, the side view swing arm angle geometry improves greatly. Having said that, if your car is a cruiser, it's a hot rod, you're just cruising around town, going to Dairy Queen, you just want a hot street car, the leaf spring pocket is absolutely fine. I don't think you would feel any difference if you went with a lower longer link. If you're building an all-out performance car and you want every advantage you can possibly get, then by all means certainly go with the lower longer bracket. I kind of like the look personally of the lower longer trailing arm, because you can see some of it from the side of the car when it's at ride height from the outside, and it kind of looks like a Shelby underrider bar, so it does look pretty cool. So we're going to close up, zoom in here, and I'm going to show you how these install into the chassis brackets. Okay, here we are, zoomed in on the leaf spring pocket here. This side we're going to put the trailing arm into the stock leaf spring pocket right here. Nothing has changed here. This will be how it is on your car. It's just the stock location. Basically, we've got a long bolt, a couple of spacers, and some washers and a nut. So the bolt will just simply pass through the stock location, just like how you would be installing, leaf springs. We have this little spacer right here that would bridge the gap between the bushing and the stock frame. And then we have another bushing on this side. Okay, and then a washer and a nylon insert lock nut. And we're not going to tighten these up right now, we're just going to leave that loose, and then we'll tighten everything up when it's all connected to the rear end housing. Okay, and here you can see the lower, longer bracket already welded onto the frame. The instructions on where to position this are in our booklet that we send along with the 3-link. So it's quite simple. The bracket cradles the bushing. We just put the bushing into the bracket like so. And then we're going to install the bolt. And then we have a washer and a nylon insert lock nut. And we're just going to leave this loose, and we'll tighten this all up when it's attached to the trailing arm bracket on the rear end housing. So there you have it. Here you can see our custom valve Bilstein shocks ready to go onto the display piece. We have a couple of different versions here. The Street and Sport typically would come in this type of shock here without the Schrader valve on the end. And race valving typically comes with the aluminum end on the end of the shock here with the Schrader valve. And what this allows you to do is to tune the nitrogen pressure below the dividing piston in the shock absorber itself, and that can actually change some of the spring rates ever so slightly. We can also build the race valving into a shock similar to this one without the Schrader valve. Schrader valve is like a bike tire or a car tire. It will bleed off, so you will need to purchase the fill tool from us if you do want to run this option, and then pick up and carry around a bottle of nitrogen, which you can get from your local welding supply store. But it's a little bit more involved for those guys that want that level of tunability. The nice things about these shocks is obviously we've put the work in to custom valve these to your specific weight and your needs. We've got the street, sport, and race valving, and that would give you the the ride quality that you're looking for there. We have a threaded sleeve on here, so with the included spanner wrench you can adjust ride height. You simply back off the little grub screw here, use the wrench to raise or lower this perch. That adjusts your ride height. We use hypercoil springs, which we've found to be some of the best coil springs that are available. The nice thing about these is they come in 25 pound increments, so we can tune the car to do whatever you really desire from it. So if it's just a Dairy Queen cruiser right onto full-on track cars, we can supply any spring rate that you want. The nice thing about these shocks is they also have monoball ends, so they pivot around real free. There's no binding there, no rubber bushings. And we also include these Torrington thrust washer bearings underneath the spring and the seat. As the spring compresses, the spring will want to twist. So this will allow this to pivot here without tearing up the perch, and also takes out a little bit of bind there. And we've also got a shaft mounted bump stop. On the 3-link, the stock bump stop is now rendered obsolete. We don't need that anymore, so we have this shaft mounted one, which is actually, you can change the height if you wish, and is tunable. We do offer that in various different durometers for those race car guys also. So there we go, there's the quick overview of the shocks. We're now going to put these onto the display. Okay, so what you see here is one of our full flowing 9-inch housings. We're actually going to use this piece on our display. The 3-link system is completely compatible with conventional 9-inch housings, as well as 8-inch and 8.8 inches. If you want to use your existing housing, then of course we can send you the brackets for you to weld on your housing. If you order one of our full flowing housings like you see here, then all the welding of all the brackets will be already done, and the system will arrive all powder coated like this, ready to go in the car. We can also supply a brand new 9-inch conventional type housing if you so wish to use one of those. But just to give you a quick tour of what we have already on here, you can see the machined ends, which will take the hubs with the tapered roller bearings. That's what makes this system so good and so unique. Here's a brake bracket here where the caliper will be connected to. Then we've got the trailing arm bracket here. The trailing arm would come out of this side and run forwards into either the leaf spring pocket or the lower longer link bracket. Shock's going to mount right here, and then we have our Wattslink with the adjusting slot right here. The 9-inch housings come with this stud that we position right here for your our intermediate block, where you can run your hard line straight over to your rear brakes and then over to the floor here, and that would go on like so and be locked down with a nylon insert lock nut. We also have a vent fitting here, so you can vent the housing. The third link tabs right here would be already positioned where they need to be, and then we have fill, level and drain bungs here, and if you so wish, these can also be used to plumb in a cooler if you need to. And then one other thing we also do is we put a little brake line tab over this side here. So there you have it. There's our 9-inch full flowing housing ready to be put into the display, and we'll show you that one next.